We're about a minute away from learning the RBA's August interest rates decision, expecting it to remain as is. But let's go live to our business reporter, Ed Boyd. And Ed, as I say, we're not expecting any change.
That's right, Kieran. We're expecting the Reserve Bank of Australia to keep the interest rate on hold at 0.25% today. We're expecting that for the next few years, and that's really just due to the current state of the economy. Keeping the cash rate low is a good way to get money back into our economy. And the decision should be coming very shortly, probably in the next 30 seconds. But also joining me to discuss the decision is AMP Capital Chief Economist Shane Oliver. Shane, if you're with us, could you just...
Unfortunately, I've just lost volume, Ed. Are you still there? Hello?
Yes, Shane, what are you expecting today from the Reserve Bank?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't hear anything just then. But yeah, we're expecting the Reserve Bank to leave rates on hold. Obviously, we'll be watching two things: what they have to say about the situation in Victoria and what that means for their growth forecasts, and also what that means, how they're seeing the rise in the Australian dollar.
Yes, Shane, we've just had the decision from the Reserve Bank. They have decided to keep the cash rate on hold at 25 basis points. The Reserve Bank says in a statement the global economy is experiencing a severe contraction as countries seek to contain the coronavirus. Shane, the RBA is also putting out a statement of monetary policy on Friday, which should include some pretty bleak economic forecasts. What are you expecting there?
Well, that is the big one in all of this. I suspect that they'll probably have to revise down their forecasts. If you think over the course of the last few months, we saw that massive monetary easing back then in March. Then, of course, as we went through April, early May, it was all pretty bleak. Then we had the reopening. And I think there was a degree of optimism creeping in on the part of the Reserve Bank and government that maybe things wouldn't be as bad as expected. And they were a bit more confident in their forecast that growth would start to recover through the second half of this year going into next year. Now all of that is being questioned. Obviously, a big hit to the Victorian economy. We estimate that to be at around $12, $14 billion. That could flatline GDP growth nationally in the current quarter and therefore delay the recovery into the December quarter. So that, I think, will be the key focus, what the Reserve Bank has to say about that on Friday. I think quite clearly the Reserve Bank does stand ready to do more if they need to, and they've probably noted that again in their statement today. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of the pressure is still on Canberra. That's where all the action will be. If the Reserve Bank cuts interest rates again, all they're going to do is go down to maybe 0.1%. They're not going to go negative. They've told us that over and over. But cutting to 0.1% probably won't have much impact. They could do some more quantitative easing. But I think the real big impact is going to come out of Canberra.
Yes, Shane, you mentioned Canberra. Last month, the federal government released its economic update, which predicts the budget deficit this financial year will reach $185 billion. How much do you expect that to increase now that Melbourne has entered stage 4 lockdown?
Well, to be honest with you, last month we thought those numbers were too optimistic. We thought it was going to be more like $220 billion, so an extra $35 billion on top of the government's numbers. The situation in Victoria just adds to that. I reckon we're now heading towards a deficit this financial year of not $185 billion, not $220 billion, but probably $235, maybe $240 billion, because we're going to see a further hit to the economy from the lockdown in Victoria, and we're going to see the need for more stimulus. The JobKeeper alone will end up costing a lot more than the government is currently budgeting for.
Shane, thank you for joining me today. Kieran, we've had the Reserve Bank keep the cash rate on hold at 0.25%.